I would like to invite my illustrious panel to come ahead to the stage and take your seats so we can use every precious moment to have this conversation. So today we are talking about the range of benefits that we get from space that are brought where national space agencies, private sector satellite operators, telecommunications regulators all come to the International Telecommunication Union, another United Nations body involved in space, and work together to develop a regulatory, legal, process-oriented manner in which to facilitate new advances in the use of space in order to be able to serve humanity in all the various ways they can. So how does this happen? And what is the ITU's role and its members who participate in the ITU? How do they use these processes in order to best share the natural but shared resources of radio frequency spectrum and positions in the Earth's orbit or orbits beyond Earth's orbits? So we're going to be talking today on two of the hottest topics that are being reviewed at the ITU. One is cislunar space exploration and development. Do the regulations we have today, are they ready for the plans we have for lunar surface missions that are coming in the near future? And so we'll hear the answer to that question in this panel. And of course, you're all aware of the great rise in the population of satellites in low Earth orbit, populating these large LEO constellations. We have the representatives from 3 of these constellations here with us today to talk about how they work in the ITU, what are the issues they're working on to ensure the safe and reliable operations of all these systems as they grow. And finally, what is coming up at the World Radio Conference in 2027 on these very topics. So it should be a fascinating conversation. I'm going to transition over here. So in order to kick off the conversation, we're going to have the panelists warm up by introducing themselves. But before that, let me tell you, we will be accepting audience questions, mostly at the end, but if I see a good timely one, I might pop it in as we talk. So the QR code is on the screen. You've probably seen this already at IAC this year. You can see what other people are asking. It might inspire you to ask another question. So please use it, and I'll be monitoring up here as we go. So I'm going to turn to the panelists. So we'll start off with Kevin here to talk about where you're here from, what is your position and your role in your organization, and we'll go down the line.
All right. Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Kevin Coggins. I'm the Deputy Associate Administrator at the National Aeronautics and Space Administration in the United States. I manage space communications and navigation and spectrum for NASA. And so that means spectrum for all of our current operational missions and our future missions, the Deep Space Network that connects us to Voyager, Europa Clipper, missions all over the solar system, the Near Space Network, which we use for things closer to the Earth, including launch, and as well as many different things that orbit the Earth that provide us different types of communications capabilities. It's a really fun job, but what underlies it all is our ability to access spectrum. A big part of what we do is work with commercial space partners to help them be unleashed and form a commercial space economy so that we can start using their communication services. So we're also a very strong advocate in the government and in ITU for spectrum for commercial space partners. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jorge Sicorosi. I'm the head of Strategy, Space Strategy and Sustainability Division at the ITU, which is a new division now to respond to the current needs, as we know. And I'm very happy to be here in this panel with such a level of experts from the key players, let's say, in LEO and also deep space research. In my division, we take care of monitoring the NGSO deployments. As you know, there are different regulations to ensure that there is a harmonized deployment of NGSO, an effective one, also without harmful interference. So we process all those cases. Hopefully, we will not have in LEO. So that's why we are here. And also, we take care of space sustainability activities in the context of ITU Radio Communication Bureau. We'll see later during the discussions. And I'm really happy to be here and thankful for the opportunity for ITU. Just an additional piece of information, if you ask. I am also coming from the Southern Hemisphere, from the other side, from Argentina, and then moved to Geneva. So happy also to be here in this very nice country. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Good day to everybody. Pleasure to be here and a pleasure for the invitation. Yes, I'm Joseph Kohler. I am from a small country in Europe, Austria. I moved to the United States about 25 years ago, and I live now in Arlington, Virginia. I'm at a company that started out as a small online bookstore. And now we're actually operating satellites. So we have 150 satellites operating today for the constellation Amazon Kuiper. I'm the head of space safety and sustainability. That's something I was always very passionate about. I started working on this topic about 15 years ago in various different roles. And so I'm very proud to be here and happy to talk more about space safety and sustainability and how Amazon Kuiper is taking this topic very seriously. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone. It's a privilege and honor to be here on this panel, and thanks for Andrew for organizing this conversation. I'm Zhang Peng, I'm come from China and representing the Galaxy Space startup commercial space company. We focus on the satellite manufacture and operations. As for today's topic, in sustainable innovation, I think from our perspective, innovation is quite important because we are in the business and innovation matters. But sustainable innovation holds far significance because that's not only critical for our own business, for the resilient operation, such as cash flow, continuing deliverability. Also, I think it's can achieving and providing some developing opportunities for us, both for our own and for our future. And as for the innovation, in past 5 years, we have developed more than 30 satellites, high-performance satellites, including the world's first broadband communication satellite, and utilizing the QV band as a feed links, the world's first four satellite interferometric sat systems, and using formation flying, cartwheel formation flying. Also, we developed China's first stackable flat panel satellite, kind of like Starlink, right? And also, based on satellites, we built China's first trial constellation network and achieving several groundbreaking validations, both domestically and internationally. As for the sustainability, we take the spectrum and optical use very seriously. In China, for every satellite operator and launch service provider, we have a lot of series of issues to comply. Before you launch your satellite, you have to complete the coordination with other operators to get your permission, frequency permission, and for space objects, you have to complete a registration process, including submitting some specific orbit parameters, your safety design report, also the documentation about the compliance with the debris mitigation requirement, and something like that, including the end-of-life disposal plan. And besides that, we have established with our China's National Space Administration about the satellite operations. Yeah, and our colleague will submit satellite information once launched and synchronize the precise information before the maneuver and after orbit determination, and they will perform the satellite collision risk assessment for us, and to make sure the space sustainability. Yes.
Well, thank you so much. That was a good in-depth, and we'll get back to some of these details as we proceed. But thank you, and thank you so much for joining the panel today.
Such advertisement.
So David, welcome.
Yeah, hi. I'm David Goldman. I'm the Vice President of Satellite Policy at SpaceX. The way these seats are set up, I'm like sticking out. I'm feeling very vulnerable right now. Please be nice with your questions.
I'll protect you, David.
What's that?
I'll protect you.
Thank you. I feel like I'm sticking out here. So the team that I work on, we oversee all the spectrum, broadband, space sustainability policy, regulatory issues for SpaceX. Starlink now has over 7,000 satellites in orbit. We as a company are launching about every 2 days at this point. Not all of those launches are Starlink launches, but a lot of them are. So we're continuously putting up more and more capacity into this system. And we're continuing to kind of improve the satellites and keep them going to kind of make sure that we're able to provide as much service as possible. Right now, we're in about 150 countries. We're providing service around the world. I have lost track with how many people are on the system. I think we're over 7 million at this point. That's all around the world. And we're seeing growth in a lot of developing countries, which is really the most exciting to me. I really think that's, these kinds of systems, this is one of the best uses of these systems, is to be able to provide service where it's too hard, too expensive for terrestrial services to reach. And so it's been really exciting to see that growth in those parts of the world. But thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
And thank you all for joining us for this conversation today. I've mentioned to the panelists, although I will be asking some softball questions, I want us to be inspired to have conversation among each other. And the panelists are even allowed to ask each other a question. So we'll see if that actually happens, because that's when the magic happens at one of these panels. So that's your challenge today. So before we get into the details, I realize not everyone is very aware of the ITU, the venerable institution of the ITU, which is a vibrant part of today's production of space law. Did you know they adopt new provisions of space law about every 4 years? A lot of people aren't aware of that. So Jorge, if you could just tell us a little bit about, enough of a basic about ITU so people can kind of understand the background of some of what we'll be talking about today.
Okay, thank you. I'll try. So it's more than 100 years, not so old like ITU, but started in 1865. So we'll try to cover quickly until today's. For those who are not so familiar, ITU started as the International Telecommunication Union, so to harmonize the use of the first telecommunications. And we are arriving today to ensure the compatibility between thousands of satellite systems which are flying. And from 1963, in fact, we have the first conference after as you know, the Sputnik 1, followed by Telstar, etc., when our member states started to see to have the vision of the need to have some coordination in space. So in 1963, we have a space conference in Geneva, setting the first frequency bands to be used for space services. And thanks to that vision, I would say, we are in a situation today we are really using all these space services, as I said, with thousands of satellites flying and transmitting in a harmonized manner. Maybe we'll touch a little bit later about the cislunar communication as well, but this is a kind of foundations where we can see how, thanks to these agreements between different states, and today it's not only the different states, but also with the private sector, we are in the situation where we can benefit of these systems, and perhaps the same would be in future for the moon. No? When it comes for the space sustainability, because this panel is about sustainability and innovation, at the ITU we believe that sustainability and innovation are going hand by hand. So in our context in particular, we think that it's not only the way we approach to space sustainability is not the traditional one only thinking about space environment, which is certainly very important, but also we need to think about the use of a spectrum and how it's being used, how it's being operated. So to ensure that there is no harmful interference, because if you have interference blocking your transponder, for example, obviously you cannot have a successful mission. So that's, in a few words, why we need to ensure a proper coordination between satellite systems from the spectrum side and the ITU, also from the environment side, maybe in different places. But this is really needed to have this sustainability. In our house, let's say in ITU, we try to facilitate the communication between the key players like we have here to do the data sharing. For your information, last year we have the Space Sustainability Forum in Geneva, the first edition. We'll have the second one next week. And the feedback we got from there was the need for certain actions, for example, data sharing. So we are trying to facilitate those actions. Obviously, as well to prevent harmful interference. And, the ultimate goal is to ensure the access and the efficient use of a spectrum of resources, which is our main mandate. So that's in a few words from 1965 until today, and hopefully for many years.
And one of the, thank you, Jorge, one of the key factors behind the success of the ITU is the fact that the companies who are inventing new technologies and new services are able to participate as sector members or on national delegations, especially at the working levels where they're trying to decide, how could these systems share spectrum without causing harmful interference. So it's constantly innovating based on development in real time. So that sets it apart from some of the other UN bodies which don't have such active partnership and engagement with the private sector, with academia, with a broad expanse of the space community, but also other parts of telecommunications. So it's an aspect I always like to emphasize. But when it comes to making treaties, of course, that is member state to member state. So we are still talking United Nations, but that's at the highest level. At the working level, the role of the private sector is very important. So as we have our discussion this morning, you'll hear more about, how people participate in the ITU's processes in order to make regulations necessary for innovation and sustainable use of these assets. So let's dive now into the substance of our conversation this morning to talk a little bit about the world of space exploration, so to speak. And we have these upcoming Artemis missions. We have ILRS. We've here at IAC about all these exciting missions to the moon and on to Mars in the future. So thankfully, Kevin is with us today to talk from the space agency perspective. Just to start things off, so you mentioned already that NASA is actively engaged in the work of in the ITU to support all the systems that you were mentioning. So how do you go about, what are the main ways you participate in the ITU, and what is your top priority there right now?
To answer that, I have to ask a question and tell a story. My first question is, how many people in this room knew they were coming into a conversation about spectrum? Yeah, that's what I thought. I've already seen a couple people learn that and duck out the back.
I know.
But we'll try to make it as entertaining and interesting as possible. But
it's important.
Whether it's space
Kevin,
or in this room.
Sorry to interrupt, but
Yep.
3 people on the panel did not raise their hands.
Nice. Well, we're in for it. This is going to be entertaining. And for it to be entertaining and be about spectrum at the same time, that's going to be interesting. Each of you has cellular devices that need to work. And they're all in this room at the same time, and they're all working at the same time. That's not by accident. On the Earth, we've had humans with their foot on the ground for a long time. We have all these devices that we use, And we've had to have bodies like the ITU to help us figure out how do we do it together. We have partners that have certain needs. Maybe it's a commercial space partner, maybe it's another country. And we've got needs, they've got needs. We've got to get together and figure out how we're going to meet our needs together without interfering with one another. Back during Apollo 10, there was some weird sounds that the astronauts heard. They're on an active, risky space operation, and comms were getting interfered with. They were getting these warbling, these weird sounds. How many of you guys have heard about this thing on Apollo 10? Right? So what it was radio frequency interference between the command module and the lander module. They each had some radios in there. Now this is not between countries, but it's one of the early cases of RF interference in space. It could have been so bad that they weren't able to complete their mission. And when we send humans to the moon and we send humans to Mars, we have to make sure that with all of us operating in that cislunar lunar environment and more of us in the future, decades from now, operating in a Martian or other environments, we've got to make sure that we have safety and we can execute the mission well. Sometimes when we talk about space ops, though, we forget about our friends in science. Science is about sensitive instruments, sensitive measurements, finding things in the noise. If you were to have a cellular phone on the moon, something at that power, it would really hurt radio astronomy because they see that as an extremely bright spot in the sky. And so how do we protect them in this, right? Maybe it's a radio astronomy user in ESA, and there's another entity, we're on the moon, and we want to operate in close frequencies or similar frequencies. We have to coordinate. So to the question, how do we work in the ITU? We work in the ITU to share our strategies and plans and our mission ops, scenarios with our partners, so they understand how we need to use frequency, what we're using it for. Maybe some rules need to be created to protect that. We need to understand what they need. We need to figure out how do we build consensus in a group of us to advocate together for a change or to protect something. And so it can be a very collaborative forum that helps us all achieve our national interest or achieve our business interests.
Thank you. That was great. So we have right now at the ITU something called an agenda item. We're preparing for a World Radio Conference in 2027. That's the global treaty conference where we come together to decide whether to change the international radio regulations. And there is an item specifically on cislunar surface and cislunar orbital communications. Why do we have this item, and what does it mean for our next steps in space, or in cislunar space? And by our, I mean humanities, NASA and beyond.
Okay. So is this one for me and the whole panel?
It's for you. It's for you, and Jorge
Okay.
can chime in. And if anyone else has views, they're welcome to as well.
One of the things we want to achieve at NASA is reuse of technology. If 3GPP works here on the Earth, 3GPP can work on a lunar environment when we're building out lunar infrastructure for long-term human presence on the moon. You think about the infrastructure that we need here on the Earth. We need power. We need to move things around like water. We need to keep food stored properly. We need safe environments for astronauts. One of the very important things we need is alerts on space weather. We have to detect when there's going to be solar flares or other dangerous situations so the astronauts can shelter. And so, IoT on the Earth is a good example for us of what the environment might be like on the moon as well. So you can imagine a lot of communication scenarios. We've solved that on the Earth very well. And one of the things we want to create is some awareness and make sure we start to lay in the foundation for how we want to drive those missions on the moon.
Jorge, can you add? Do you have anything to add on this?
In fact, you didn't tell me you were going to speak about spectrum, he said, so I didn't prepare, but I will do my best. So, I forgot to mention the WRC process at the ITU, in fact. So, as we know, and the technology is being innovative and is evolving, obviously, we also have to update and evolve the radio regulations. And that's why we have 4-year cycles of conference, World Radio Conference, organized by ITU with all the member states and also the private sector, as you said. So that was important to highlight that we are working across sectors and across regions. And when we are receiving the different needs from the member states and from the industry, for example, in this case for cislunar communications, obviously at one point this has to be reflected in the radio regulations in terms of which frequencies are appropriate to use for these services and where, no? For example. So, as we mentioned before, 60 years ago, they started to allocate frequency bands for different services that today are being used for LEO, for fixed satellite service, mobile satellite service in different orbits. And now we are seeing also the need to do something similar, kind of setting a framework for the cislunar communications. Of course, the regulation can never be before the technology because you would kill the technology. So, but normally once this is being developed and we see the need to coordinate, as Kevin was mentioning, there is a need for that in order to avoid the harmful interference. So for that, in the previous WRC 23, it was identified the need to establish this framework. And during these 4 years, between WRC 23 and WRC 27, so the next conference will be in 2027, there will be some identification of frequency bands and technical regulatory mechanism to ensure that these services can properly be deployed on the moon, no? Not only on the surface of the moon, but also between the orbit and the... So if I understand well, correct me, Kevin, because you are the expert, but we need to build a new ecosystem on the moon like we have here. So we need PNT, radio navigation satellite service, positioning, timing, mobile between the rover, I believe. And so all this has to be somehow replicated on the moon with different conditions, probably an environment much more hostile. And we will learn a lot from that. And then this will be reflected on the radio regulations. And therefore, every country later on has to reflect also on the national legislation in order to ensure that this is being enforced somehow. That's in a few words, if I understood.
Yes, very helpful. Thank you. Well, let's make sure we turn to our other topic as well in the hour we have, and that is our large LEO constellations. Joseph, maybe I'll turn to you first about how your company works within the ITU and what your top priorities are right now at the ITU.
Yeah, very important question, and I see people have not left yet, even after talking so much spectrum. So I guess everything's open here. So the top priorities for us, as you explained earlier with the ITU, the next World Radio Conference, over 80% of the agenda items are related to NGSO system or LEO operations, right? And so it's really important for us as a company. We actually get to participate in those discussions. We get to participate as delegation members to the ITU Working Party 4A. That's the group that's working a lot of these items here. And the two main priorities for us are, topic-wise, is of course EPFD, and the other one is space sustainability. And we do that by contributing to studies. Look, the ITU is really good at doing technical analysis and studies that then inform, like what Audrey said earlier, the regulations, the treaties that are coming out of that. And so we're contributing to those studies, we're contributing to the discussions, and because that's really the critical part here. And as I said, EPFD is one part, and the other one is space sustainability.
Now you said EPFD.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So not
Did
everyone
I open
knows.
A Pandora's box?
No,
Okay.
no, it is a huge issue, but you need to explain in 2 sentences or less basically what that means.
So EPFD is the equivalent power flux density, and it's a analysis that was done and developed about 20 years ago, or over 20 years ago. Based on, back then, satellites were still mostly using analog systems, analog signals, and our view, and I think some of our colleagues here as well, these technical analyses are ready for a revisit, new technical studies. Today's system are digital, they have many more different types of capabilities and switching and so forth in order to share that spectrum. So that's really, that's the key part.
Sharing
there, right?
with the satellites in geostationary
That's right.
orbit. Yeah, it's a whole new thing. an old thing, but needs to be refreshed perhaps.
Right. And the other part, what I mentioned earlier, is space sustainability, right? So the ITU came out with a Resolution 74 that asks the working parties to develop a handbook that is collecting experiences and best practices from other nations to help with that capacity building on space sustainability. Because space sustainability is based on safe operations in space, and it will help everybody to have those safe operations in space. And so a handbook is one thing. Another one is to work on studies towards safe disposal methods. ITU developed a wonderful website where countries and operators submit their best practices. So there's a lot of different topics going on, and we as a company want to be active participants because they're going to affect us as well.
Thank you. Well, I have the same question for you, Pen.
Okay, I will share how we engage with ITU.
And your top priority.
Okay. I want to say, first of all, at Galaxy Space, we actively participating in ITU is not a regulatory requirement, but also a fundamental necessity. Yes. Since we work closely with our Ministry of Industry and Information Technology of China, kind of like FCC in USA. Through this partnership, we can provide our technical solutions, technical analysis, and some operational experience, also some especially perspective of industry to the ITU. And since 2019, the second year after our founding, we have been actively involved in the starting groups of the ITU, especially for the working party 4A and 4C, with respect to the efficiently use of orbit and the spectrum for the fixed sunlight service and the mobile sunlight services. And we also contribute some crucial revisions to ITUR recommendations, such as interference avoidance between the non-GSO system and the GSO systems. And as the explosive growth of the LEO constellation, we think there is still a lot of problem to solve. Not only the interference between the non-GSO and GSO, also the inter-non-GSO and between the non-GSO and the AMT terrestrial network. The D2C and D2D is a tendency. So it's quite a lot. I also noticed that Starlink have supplied some new VLEO orbits for the D2C network, right? Yes, quite a lot of satellites. I think that's still challenging to solve the interference between the non-GSO system and the terrestrial network, right? And from some research from the working party 4A, it shows that the constellation size affects the interference avoidance strategies very much. For large constellations with thousands of satellites, there are plenty of resources to avoid the interferences. You can use a beam hopping and choose the sunlight to link, but for without impact on the system service, right? But for smaller constellation with just like tens to hundreds of satellites, the limited resources means the avoidance strategy may come at an exponentially high cost, and maybe affect the use of the system, right? So these all the problem we care about, and as a private company, our top priority at the ITU is to make the spectrum allocation and the implementation more practical, more fair, more clear, and especially make some space for our future satellite operations. Yes, that's what we have done at the ITU. Yeah.
Thank you. And of course, we should say that the next World Radio Conference will be in China at Shanghai. So you'll have good opportunities to welcome all
every
this.
audience and Attendees to come to China. By the way, we have a booth downstairs. I could visit. Yeah.
Good. David, same question to you.
Yeah. So as Joseph said, I think 80%, that's what everyone's saying, is that of the issues at the next World Radio Conference are focused on low Earth orbit. Fortunately, people tend to overlook Starlink and don't talk about us much, so we just sit in the background and try to just kind of observe. No, we, for better or worse, we have to spend a lot of time working on these issues at the ITU. I think our biggest issues, actually, it kind of parallels what Amazon has. The equivalent power flux density, fancy word, it's the power level that we have to operate at. We think that it is outdated. We have done tests that show that we can actually turn up the power as much as 8 times from where it currently is. That's an 8x increase in capacity that low Earth orbit systems can provide. That is significant more broadband provided to people around the world without increasing harmful interference to any other operations. This is just, it's a game changer of a rule of if what you care about is getting as many people online with the best possible service around the world, changing this rule is the single most impactful knob that we have to turn. And so for us, this is our top priority. Space sustainability, also super critical. I think one of the things that I think that the ITU can play a particularly useful role on space sustainability actually is that I think we tend to see sometimes when there's an effort to rush to regulation before people really understand the issue, you can actually have counterproductive rules. But one of the things that, as complicated as all of this sounds, and it's rocket science, actually there's really simple solutions to the highest risk issues that we face, which is a lack of communication between operators. We see satellites getting launched into operational orbits of other systems without talking to each other, without sharing. We've heard a little bit about it. Jorge was talking about it. Peng was talking about sharing data. This is absolutely critical, is sharing ephemeris, like where the satellites are, covariance, what's the risk, what's your certainty on where the satellites are going to go. That is the single most important thing you can do to help decrease risk in space, is being able to share this information. I think, to be totally frank, around the world, there's trust issues between operators, between countries. I think the ITU can play a pivotal role in trying to bring people together and share information at a trusted place, where we don't have to. One of the issues, I think, with the ITU and the pace of what's going on in space, the ITU meets every 4 years. That is a very slow cycle compared to what's happening in space right now. Trying to get regulations on this, you're going to miss the issues by the time you get there. But what you can do is, if we can facilitate and kind of leverage the ITU to be able to share information with each other and talk to each other better in a more trusted format, to be able to share this data, I think that is the single best thing that we can do to lower the risk.
I want to echo to David. As one colleague said, we always know how to contact with forensic coordination, but we don't know who to talk about with satellite operations. So we need a platform. And
agreed. Although you have my email now, so just email me and let me know.
Yes, and so am I.
Yeah, let me jump in a little bit because I was here at ITU. And
yes.
So certainly, and that's the idea on the objective, in principle, the forum we are doing next week again, and to facilitate the communication and data sharing. And I can tell you a little bit in advance we were going to mention next week, but since we are at the IAC, we can really say one of the things we are going to call among the key LEO operators is really to exchange the direct point of contact for that. So most probably we are going to send a circular letter to all the member states and satellite operators to try to exchange this and put it in our website for a direct access, no? Because it's really important to have a quick access for both things, for RFI, for interference, but also, I believe, for operations. But if I may, I think you were asking everyone more or less the priorities and what we are doing in LEO. From the ITU side, I cannot say priority because it's the member states who set the priorities. But in a way, we can really say that there are, as we were saying before, two axes, spectrum and sustainability, certainly. And for us, it's very important to have certainty and transparency, because these are the two pillars, if you wish, for sustainability as well. Once you really know about data, when you really have certainty on the deployment of satellites, for example, you will have also sustainability. And for that, we have two resolutions in particular. I will not burden you with a lot of numbers, but WRC 19 set the resolution 35, which is the deployment for the LEO, for satellites in specific frequency bands and services in low Earth orbit. This ensures that the constellations, which are my left side, they will be deployed in a manner that they are certainly expected, let's say, and effective. And this is what my team is doing. It's really verifying that they are in compliance with those milestones, which are 10%, 50%, and 100% in different times. And also with certain orbital tolerance, which are coming from the resolution 8 from the last WRC 23. What happened is that when my team already checked, they turned back and they launched already 100 satellites more. So, so we need to check it again, because as we say, the dynamic is really fast. So, but this is the only way to really ensure this transparency and also certainty, no? So that one satellite operator knows where it's expected to have the neighbor, let's say, and vice versa. So this is, in a way, also other contribution to sustainability. And the last two conferences in terms of resolution 35 and resolution 8. I don't know if you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I wanted to add something, maybe a concrete example. Look, we actually work very closely together on space safety. We share our ephemeris, our maneuver plans, and at the technical level, we screen our orbits and so forth. So that is a really strong collaboration because both of our companies understand the importance of space safety. Now, that being said, we have looked at, and so you're already operating over 7,000 satellites, so a lot of the operation satellites are covered. But that being said, we have done an analysis on trying to understand how many operational payloads are crossing our orbits. And we identified about a little bit over 1,500 operational payloads. We were only able to identify half of them with contact information. Only 50% had contact information listed. And so that's really not a very safe environment, right? And that's, I think, speaking to what David said earlier, it seems like such a simple thing to do, to share your contact information or email address so we can reach out to you and talk about who's going to take this maneuver or not, right? But that is the most critical item today that I see that we have not accomplished yet. And it just, it baffles me that we're still talking about sharing contact information. When we do, we still have the other problem, like, for example, a story that one of my colleagues shared with me. We had a conjunction warning coming up with a Korean satellite, and we had their contact information, so we call them up. But then there's also a language barrier as well, because the answer that we got was, no, I didn't order anything from Amazon. I'm not waiting for the packages. But luckily we had a native Korean speaker in the office who was able then to get on the phone and explain what really is why we're calling. But there's a communication barrier, but if we can get across to the sharing of contact information, that would be such a benefit to all the operations.
And to follow up on that, it's just as right. Our SpaceX and Amazon work really, really closely on making sure that our satellites are working well together. And so every time there's a new Amazon launch, our engineering teams are on the phone with each other, they're talking to each other, they're planning everything out. We know exactly what each other are planning to do. And it shows we really have not had issues because we are talking to each other so closely. And it shows you can have a lot of satellites operating that if you're communicating well and working together well, that this can be done in a very sustainable way if you're talking to each other. Like that's the critical piece. On the other hand, we've had instances where a single satellite is operating where we don't know who's doing it, we don't know whether it's going to maneuver or not, and it increases our risk of collision by an order of magnitude, but from a single satellite. So really the key is this communication piece and making sure that we're putting the data out there as much as possible. You can have these systems operating together. It is doable as long as we're all being responsible.
Well, so we're going to talk more about this in Geneva next week, correct? And you will all see each other in October at Working Party 4A. So we should make the commitment to make progress on this issue.
Code of conduct.
Yep.
Maybe you lead us to a code of conduct. Code of conduct.
Code of conduct. Oh.
Yes, that's also complementary, but I agree that the first point is to have the directory, and this goes on not only for the LEO large constellations operator, because as I think you were trying to mention, obviously LEO is very much used, very much shared, spectrum and orbit, and space is today is being accessed by many, many more countries. There are emerging powers as well with more or less experience, and we need all these contacts, in fact, not only the large operation, which have already a lot of experience, but also the emerging countries, which are sometimes launching small CubeSats, they also should have a direct point of contact, at least to know if they have capabilities on board to maneuver or not. So if they don't have capabilities, they know that they can maneuver by themselves, I understand. But this basic information, it's very simple, but it's very important as well. That's what we understand from this forum.
And this kind of innovation doesn't require a once every 4-year treaty conference. This is something we can do now, correct?
Oh, thanks for the point, because sometimes we are challenged about mandate or non-mandate. We have several resolutions, and just to pick up one, Resolution 186 from the Plenipotentiary Conference speaks about, it's a very long title, but it's something like, transparency and confidence building measures in outer space. So, and this resolution is instructing us, the Bureau and the Secretary General, to disseminate information and facilitate the communication between different stakeholders, to do satellite monitoring, etc. So this is already in our mandate, and this is what we are doing.
Okay. And the ITU also developed standards that can be agreed at lower levels of the ITU. You don't always have to wait for a World Radio Conference to get any progress accomplished. Plus, the operators can work together at the working parties and exchange telephone numbers to be able to better coordinate with one another, especially as many more constellations are being launched. So that we will look for progress in this area. We want to report back at IAC next year.
Certainly, that's a good idea in Turkey, I think. And I would like to invite all of you also to visit the Space Sustainability Gateway from ITU, where you can find all this information in terms of strategies for post-mission disposal from different countries, from NASA, from ESA, from a group of satellite operators, and also any technical information from reports from study groups we are trying to make available there, together with the future list of point of contacts.
Excellent, excellent. So before we turn to audience questions, are there any other ways where you believe the ITU could do more to, or there things you would change in the ITU system in order to improve the ability for you to perform your missions? And this goes to you as well, Kevin. Any other ideas you wanted to share with the audience today? Joseph, you look ready to go.
No, go ahead. NASA first.
I'll start. So you guys are getting a good idea what this is about, right? There's only so much physical space we can fly satellites through. There's only so much spectrum we can use. For NASA, we've been operating around the Earth and throughout the solar system, and now beyond the solar system for a long time. Whether it's ground stations, whether it's our tracking and data relay satellites, whether it's our Apollo missions to the moon, our Artemis missions to the moon, our science missions that even with Voyager reaches outside the solar system. But for most of our missions at NASA, when we stretch out, there's no one on our path. just the planets, the asteroids, the things we're going to study, the places we're going to. As you get back to Earth, it gets more challenging. Spectrum stays challenging because ultimately it always has to come down to the Earth and not interfere or be interfered with. And so, you know, NASA's always had to build our own infrastructure for so long. But in recent times, we've watched commercial evolve. We've watched things like Kuiper and SpaceX and others deploy constellations in LEO, MEO, GEO that we can tap into instead of launching our own satellites. We've got Intuitive Machines, who's putting a commercial relay and GPS system around the moon. For NASA, we're just going to pay them to let us use it as a user like everybody else. And so one of the things with NASA, our big change in how we work in the ITU is we come in there and we advocate now for our commercial space partners, because I need our commercial space partners to have, you know, the paths they need to solve their conjunction problems, to solve their spectrum problems, to be able to offer me those services so that I can fully transition to being a supporter and a user of the commercial space economy.
The two items I would mention here is, number one, I'm looking for a broad collaborative spirit between ITU and UNUSA and COPIUS. I mean, let's not forget that office also has decades-long experience on the topic of long-term sustainability. They even have a registration convention where countries have to register their objects. But unfortunately, that's not sufficient because we cannot just talk to the country first and then find out who actually the operator is. It needs to be more direct communication. And every multilateral venue has advantages and disadvantages, right, in terms of industry participation and not. But for example, the COPIUS recently this summer adopted an SSA experts group where they're trying to have more industry participation as well. So I'm looking for a strong collaboration between those two because I think this is a critically important topic that all parties can really bring a change to the environment so we can all operate safely and provide those services to humanity that we're looking forward to. The second topic is, and again, every venue has similar issues, but is less politicization of agenda items. And look, we're having incumbents who are terrified of NGSO operations, and they do political maneuvering, blocking of agenda items or delaying. And we need that progress, right? So less political agenda maneuvering and more collaboration. I think those are the things that I would really look forward to.
Agreed. Anyone else want to offer any thoughts? David?
I guess I can go quick. So first, 10-year-old me thinks that the idea that I work at a rocket ship company that works with NASA and launches NASA stuff is the coolest thing that's ever happened. And I love the fact that NASA has been so collaborative and that we get to work together on so many things. It really is like a highlight of the job. It is where things should be going, and it really has been just a treat. As far as the ITU goes, to be honest, the thing that worries me the most with the ITU is the pace, right? It has 4-year meetings. I just don't know how sustainable that is of maintaining kind of the relevance of these conversations on technologies that are evolving so quickly. If you're meeting every 4 years and it takes a cycle to even get something on the agenda, you go back 8 years. So SpaceX is now the largest satellite constellation operator in history. 8 years ago, we had no satellites, none, right? So if we had to start an issue, talking about an issue 8 years ago, we would have no idea where we're currently standing. I don't think that this is a sustainable model to be able to keep it at this pace and maintain kind of the relevancy on the issues. One of the things that's kind of is an important safety valve that I think, frankly, is under threat right now that I'm really kind of concerned about where things are going is the ITU thankfully has this kind of do no harm rule. It's, everything at the ITU has to be numbered, so it's 4.4. Put that aside. It's essentially saying you can innovate as long as you're not doing any harm to anybody. There's a lot of push to try to limit that. Let me tell you what happens when you do that. Right now, for example, you heard a little bit about it. We have a direct-to-device system that we're operating right now. So we have millions of people around the world who are using our direct-to-device system. The number one use case for it is during emergencies. When terrestrial networks go out, we get millions and millions of texts of people calling for help, finding their loved ones during an emergency when they have no other way to communicate. That is all operating currently under the do no harm rule at the ITU. That is the only way that we were able to get it, that we could operate, not because the ITU did anything wrong, is the cycle is too long to be able to have rules for a new innovative service. There's efforts to push back on this and to limit that kind of innovation and take this rule away. That is a safety of life rule. That is critical for new innovation, for new development, and we have to really, really be careful that if we're going to continue to make decisions on these time cycles, that we have a safety valve that allows there to be innovation so long as you're not harming anybody else.
Good point. And 4.4 will likely come up at the World Radio Conference and definitely at Working Party 4A, whether it should be under Agenda Item 7. Well, let's talk about some of the questions coming in. Some of what you have just brought up, okay, hold on a second, have been our topics that have been coming up in our questions. So thank you on that. Jorge?
No, just very quickly to answer a few things about the ITU modernization for some things, if you wish. On EPFD or the process, we also have to say, because probably the audience is not very familiar with the equivalent power flux density, these are limits which were studied certainly time ago, but these are to protect the geostationary satellite system. So it's not all about LEO, like we are having here in the panel, but there are also geostationary satellite systems, which are also very important. And that's the reason of the EPFD. Then it can be discussed is how much or how less it can be the level. But both the orbit and the spectrum is a natural resource to be shared. On the WRC cycle of 4 years, there were tries in the past to do it for 3 years, and there were a couple of, but we are on your hands. The member states have to decide to do it, even if you wish to do it 2 years. What is important is to have the sufficient time to have very solid studies, and consensus building, as you know, takes time. And once the decision is taken, obviously everybody has to respect and to follow that decision in terms of framework. Because sometimes it may happen that the WRC takes one decision, and then 1 or 2 years after, the same space stakeholder is thinking about something different, and say, well, but we just set a framework, so we have to follow in that direction. No? So that's why sometimes it takes time. But all in all, I would say we need to think about the resilience of the system. So when we are speaking about a new system, it's also trying to facilitate the introduction of new technologies while we are protecting the existing ones. Because otherwise, you will be in the same situation in the future by another system. So that's why it takes, let's say, these 3 to 4 years in the sense of. But I agree that we would love to have, of course, sometimes solutions before it's deployed, let's say, no?
I have some ideas. We can talk.
Oh, yeah, and I want to be part of this conversation, too, because I lived through those times when we had these conferences every 2 years, and the FCC was a big supporter of that at one time. But, you know, one interesting thing about these WRCs is we have these huge agendas. They last 4 weeks long, but every decision is taken by consensus. So it's consensus by exhaustion. It's really crazy. But anyway, it is sausage making. So, Kevin, we do have a question for you here, if I can find it now. Is there a role for Artemis Accords countries to cooperate on spectrum issues, even though it is not an explicit part of the Accords?
There's a role for every country to cooperate in spectrum issues, right?
Brilliant.
The spectrum we use isn't defined by the Artemis Accords. It's defined by the fact that we physically live here. And you can't create more spectrum. You can't add to it. You can't take away from it. And everyone's already in it. And so we do spectrum coordination through the ITU with everyone because it's required, because you can't contain them within a subset of the countries because everyone uses it. It's a great question.
And we did get a question about the ITU that and space sustainability. And I think, Joseph, I appreciated your comment about the need to complement each other. I just wanted to mention at 3:30, I'm doing a paper on that very subject too in room C23. But there are ways the ITU plays a role in space sustainability, but it's not a replacement for UN COPUOS or UN USA, who are responsible for the Outer Space Treaty. But the ITU is the one where it brings together the national telecommunications regulators who license systems like SpaceX or Galaxy Space, and they come together and have these conversations there. Plus, the ITU has other folks who do capacity building. There's a whole development sector in the ITU where they can help COPUOS in capacity building and spreading this knowledge. And also, we've heard about this, the gateway and the handbook. This is all about sharing information, the best practices of national administrations in orbital debris mitigation requirements. There are various ways for us all to work together to build a community of space sustainability. It's not just one agency or another. It's all working together. So we hope that this panel today helped, bring better understanding with you as well as to, yes, spectrum is hard to understand, but it is a vital part of every space mission that you're hearing about at IAC. And we all need to work together in the ITU to make sure everyone has the access they need in order to build these amazing missions that improve our lives on Earth. So I wanted to help me thank these wonderful panelists for this discussion today. And thank you for coming to this GNF today.